Okay, I want to welcome everyone to the Jewish Heritage Center Queens Division, our Wednesday night series of classes, and I'm subbing for Rabbi Turk tonight, so instead of going with Exodus beneath the lines, I've decided once again to do something a little bit more topical on the Parsha, or in this case, on the new Chumash, on the new book of the 5 books of Moses that we're going to be starting to read this week. And tonight's class is entitled Moshe, Profit Margin for the Jewish People. Before we get started, as always, I want to thank the good folks at TorahAnytime.com for recording the class, for uploading the class, and for making it available for those who couldn't be here in person. Okay. Let's start with a couple of prefaces. Number one, the great monotheistic faith that grabs all the headlines today is not Judaism but Islam. And one of the main features of Islam is their veneration and elevation, at least for me as an outsider looking in, it seems to me, to an almost godlike level of the prophet. The prophet. They always say the prophet. Muhammad is the prophet with a definite article. And not only does that, again, without any deep study of the Islamic religion, it automatically telegraphs to me the notion and the lesson that a tenet of the Islamic faith is that Muhammad is the supreme prophet, the ultimate prophet, the greatest prophet ever. But also, again, things might get lost in translation, but certainly the way the media reports some of the Islamic terrorist violence, Islamofascism they call it, that takes place across the globe, it's blaspheming the prophet. Okay? Now, where I come from, blasphemy is something that you speak against God. I can understand slandering the prophet, defaming the prophet, called blaspheming the prophet. So, again, I'm not 100% sure, I never took a course in comparative religion, but it certainly seems to me, it comes across to me, that the Islamic faith puts a tremendous emphasis and a tremendous centrality on the person of Muhammad and on the supremacy of his prophecy. Okay? Most people don't think of Judaism that way. Most Jews don't think of Judaism that way. Okay, People's Exhibit 1. You notice I put out both Sidurim and Chumashim here today. Okay, take a look in your prayer books, in your Art Scroll prayer books. Take a look. Page 179. Okay. On page 179, you have the 13 articles of faith, the 13 principles of faith, as articulated by the Rambam, Maimonides. Okay? The ones that concern me tonight are number 6 and 7. Okay? 8 is ancillary. You can look ahead at 8 if you want yourself, but the one I want to concentrate on is number 6 and 7. Article of faith. These are the 13 things that a Jew has to believe in. If you don't believe in this, you're practicing some kind of Judaism, or some kind of religion, I should say, other than Judaism. Number 6, I believe with complete faith that all the words of the prophets are true. We have a biblical canon. We have prophets that have been accepted throughout the millennia by the Jewish people. We don't believe that they were charlatans. We don't believe that they were snake oil merchants. We don't believe that they were schizophrenics. There are a lot of people today who also claim that they hear voices, and sometimes even the voice of God, voice of angels, the voice of God. We lock those people up in padded cells. Right? We don't believe that about our official prophets. They're telling the truth. Number 1. That's very important. First, before you can talk about supreme prophets, first you have to say that there's such a thing as a profit margin altogether. Who says there's such a thing as prophecy? Okay. Number 7. I believe with complete faith that the prophecy of Moses, our teacher, peace upon him, was true, and that he was the father of the prophets, both those who preceded him and those who followed him. Moshe Rabbeinu is the golden age of prophecy. Moshe Rabbeinu is the ultimate prophet. He's greater than Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, than Sarah, and Rivka, and Rachel, and Leah. And he's also greater than Isaiah, than Ezekiel, and he's certainly greater than any claimants to prophecy that Jewish law and lore has repudiated their bona fides as prophets altogether, like the founders of the other two great monotheistic religions. And it's very important, many commentaries on Maimonides say that Maimonides stuck this article of faith into his 13 articles of faith, specifically as a repudiation of Islam. Because if you ask any good Christian or any good Muslim who knew the truth before the appearance of, to make 1,000 degrees of separation, before the appearance of Jesus or Muhammad, they'll say the Jews did. One day before the New Testament was revealed, so the Old Testament was true. One day before the Quran was revealed, so the Torah was true. Okay, it's a little bit different. They say the Torah was the Quran. Well, there was always Islam. Okay? But the point is, these religions venerate Moshe too. They just say the definitive interpretation of Moshe, or in some cases, if there's ever a contradiction between our prophet and Moses, our prophet wins. Our prophet trumps Moshe, to which Judaism gives a resounding no. And it says, no, Moshe Rabbeinu is the ultimate prophet, both for those that preceded him and for those who came after him. Okay. Now, what's the word I'm looking for? Panegyrics, I think is the word, right? So, we sing all kinds of praises to God. That's what the whole book of Psalms is all about. That's what a great part of our prayer service is about. There are verses in the Torah that indicate that it's a very good thing for human beings to praise God. Amzu yatzarti li tehilasi yisaperu. This nation I've created for myself, that they should sing my praises. V'am nivra yahaloka, a nation that's been created, being the Jewish nation, let them praise God, and so on. We're not so much into panegyrics for human beings, right? Okay, again, I don't have encyclopedic knowledge, but here, I want you to take one of these and pass them around. This is a very, very popular song that's sung in almost every congregation that I've ever participated in, Ashkenazic or Sephardic, on Simchat Torah, Simchas Torah, the day of the rejoicing of the Lord, the happiest day of the year on the Jewish calendar. Okay? And it's a song that praises, in order, God, Moses, here nicknamed the son of Amram, right? We're not talking about, now Amram had 3 very august children. Aaron and Miriam were also sons of Amram. But that's not who we're praising in this melody here. Okay, God, Moshe, the Torah, the Jewish people. Okay, those are the stitches. In each of the phrases, of the refrains of this song, that's the order. We praise God, we praise Moshe, we praise Israel, and the Torah. Torah and Israel. Torah first and Israel. And then we say from the mouth of God, Israel, the house of Israel should be blessed, should have a bracha. Okay, so you've seen I've put in boldface all the lines that praise Moshe Rabbeinu. So they are as follows: there is none as blessed as the son of Amram. There is none as loyal, or in a certain vatik can mean. Saul, how would you demetagem vatik into English?
Vatik is like senior, someone with seniority.
Good, right. A vatik could mean loyal, it could be senior, it could be pioneering. Okay, so all of that is included in the word vatik, and no one is akin to Ben Amram when it comes to that. There's no one as straight as Ben Amram. There's no prophet as Ben Amram. He holds the prophet margin over all prophets. There is no one as righteous, as just as Ben Amram. And get this, there's no one as merciful as Ben Amram. Now obviously we don't mean that God is not as merciful as Ben Amram, We mean among human beings. Okay? Some of these are familiar to us, some of these are not familiar to us. Interestingly absent from this list is what? Anyone know what superlative we normally associate with Moshe, which didn't make it into this song? Rabbeinu, well, that could be all of these together. Somebody who's blessed and senior and straight and the greatest prophet and the most just and the most merciful. That's a good CV to be your rabbi, to be your teacher.
Leader, his role as leader of the people, who's not here.
Again, I think all of these are leadership qualities. I'm talking about a more specific, a less general quality than teacher. That's it. Okay, humble. Doesn't say anything about his humility here, even though the Torah itself says he was the humblest man ever. Okay. This is the folk music that really derives from this article of Jewish faith, but it's shorthand. When you open up a siddur and you read rat-tat-tat-tat one after the other succinctly in a couple of sentences, articles of Jewish faith that Maimonides codified, they're shorthand. If we want to study a little bit more at length what Maimonides means about prophecy and how and in what ways Moshe's prophecy is superlative, and if time allows, I'll get to some more current Jewish thinkers about this. Before we do that, let's go to the main source. Let's go to the Torah itself, and let's look at some psukim, some verses about Moshe Rabbeinu and his superlative prophecy. Okay. In no particular chronological order. All right? Look at page 269. Okay, here's Moshe Rabbeinu as the novice prophet. You ever heard of the Rookie of the Year award? Sometimes we'll have the Lelef Alvei Avdolos again between the ridiculous and the sublime, 1,000 degrees of separation. But football fans out there know that we're having a very unusual season this year, where the Rookie of the Year might also be the MVP. Usually two different awards, Rookie of the Year, Most Valuable Player. But here we have Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay. So we have the burning bush. All right? Let's start on verse 2, on page 269. God's angel appeared to Moshe in the heart of the fire in the middle of a thorn bush. As he looked, Moshe realized that the bush was on fire, but was not being consumed. Moshe said to himself, I must go over there and investigate this wonderful phenomenon. Why doesn't the bush burn? When God saw that Moshe was going to investigate, he called to him from the middle of the bush. Moshe, he said. Now, again, I hope time allows me to share with you the unbelievably profound teaching of Reb Chaim Volozhin tonight, but I don't know if it will. Anyone who knows me knows I'm a tremendous fan of Rabbi Kaplan, Zechron Levracha, and his Living Torah translation. I hold it's the gold standard. Big mistake, though, putting a comma over here. Okay, the sages make a very, very big deal out of the fact when Moshe Rabbeinu's name is repeated twice, as in this prophecy, there is no psik. The Baal Koreh is not supposed to pause at all. He's supposed to read it, Moshe, Moshe. In a similar prophecy to Abraham, it says Avraham. There's a psik in the Chumashim. It's printed with a vertical line. You won't find anything in the Torah scroll itself, but the instructions to the Baal Koreh are you're supposed to read it Avraham, 1, 2, 3, Avraham, like that. This is Moshe, Moshe, quick, no comma, no pause, and that's going to be significant in comparing and contrasting their levels in prophecy. Yes, replied Moshe. Do not come any closer. Take off your shoes. Take your shoes off your feet. The place upon which you are standing is holy ground. God then said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moshe hid his face, since he was afraid to look at the divine. Okay? Too powerful. Certain things you like to look at, but you can't look at. It's just too much. In this case, it was awe-inspiring or fear-inspiring. He was afraid to look at the divine. Okay. Number one. Okay, now let's go a little bit further in the book of Shmos. I'm going to get back to as many of these verses as we can. But just first I want to familiarize you with what it says on a biblical level. Okay. Next verse I want you to look at is verse 19. Chapter 19, verse 9. That appears on page 349. What's the chapter heading here, according to Rabbi Kaplan? The Ten Commandments. Okay. Verse 9. God said to Moshe, I will come to you in a thick cloud, so that all the people will hear when I speak to you. They will then believe in you forever. This is not Maimonides making it up as he goes along. The main revelation of God on this planet and the cornerstone of the Jewish faith, Judaism, is the revelation at Sinai, the Ten Commandments. And part and parcel of the revelation at Sinai, it's not enough to believe in God. It's not enough to believe in prophecy that God is talking to us at Sinai and not mass hysteria or schizophrenia. It's important that they believe in Moshe. They're going to believe in me, they're going to believe in you too. All right? That's what God is promising Moshe as the preamble to, what's it called? To the revelation at Sinai. Okay, still in the book of Shmos, in this book here, 32:11. Give me a second. Okay, move a little bit forward to page 451. No, that's not right. Something's not right here. Give me a second. I'm sorry. I was... Page 457. Okay? Chapter 33, verse 11. God would speak to Moshe face to face, just as a person speaks to a close friend. Okay? We're going to see very, very soon that even though God speaks to other human beings, and such human beings are known as Nevi'im, as prophets, God does not speak to any other human being this way. Not face to face and not like a close friend. Exactly what these metaphors, what the descriptions mean, I'm going to let Maimonides explain that. Okay, but like I said, first I just want you to see what it says in the Torah itself. Okay. Let's skip forward to another Chumash. The Midbar Yud Beis Ches. You know what? Let's start a little bit. Let's get into the whole. Okay. Let's start on page 721, 6. Okay. Just to give you a little context, what's going on over here. This is the episode of Ben Amram sibling rivalry, so to speak. The two siblings of Moshe Rabbeinu kind of gang up on him. They were upset, and I'm explaining the parsha according to the classic commentary Rashi. Aaron and Miriam are upset that Moshe Rabbeinu was separated from his wife, Tzipora. All right? They think that it is a hubris, an act of haughtiness, an act of egomania on his part, that that he's got to be holier than thou, holier than them. They conduct normal marital life with their spouses, and they too are prophets. So they can't understand why, for his profit margin, Moshe Rabbeinu has to separate from his wife. This was perceived as an act of slander, an act of lashon hara against Moshe Rabbeinu. This is one of the fundamental precepts of lashon hara. The Chafetz Chaim and his literary output on the laws of lashon hara says that very, very often, whenever a person speaks lashon hara, they're transgressing the commandment of remembering the episode of Miriam. This is one of the paradigm examples in the Torah of lashon hara, and the lashon hara had to do with Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy. It wasn't just a little water cooler gossip. It was a lashon hara that could undermine one of the pillars of our faith, to wit, the supremacy of the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Let's read the psukim in here, starting with 6. And this itself is a prophecy. God is speaking to Miriam and Aaron now. God said, and everyone have it? Page 721, verse 6 at the bottom of the page. Chapter 12, verse 6. God said, listen carefully to my words. If someone among you experiences divine prophecy, then when I make myself known to him in a vision, I will speak to him in a dream. This is not true of my servant Moshe, who is like a trusted servant throughout my house. With him, I speak face to face, in a vision not containing allegory, so that he sees a true picture of God. How can you not be afraid to speak against my servant Moshe? Parenthetically, while we're on the topic, go back to 721. I should have started a few verses earlier. On the line that begins verse 3. It's like an indentation, a paragraph. God heard it. Moshe, however, was very humble, more so than any man on the face of the earth. So basically, in the space of a few short verses, you've gotten the superlative of Moshe Rabbeinu as a prophet, and the superlative of Moshe Rabbeinu as an anav, as a humble person. Okay, this is it. This is where it appears. Okay. 2 more verses, and then I'm ready to start Maimonides. The reason I'm reading all these verses is because Maimonides deals in depth and builds his foundations of faith primarily from these verses that we're reading inside now. Okay. The last Chumash. Okay, page 895. The 10 Commandments, take 2. Okay, for a little context, let's start from verse 2. Chapter 5, verse 2, on page 895. God your Lord made a covenant with you at Chorev. Chorev is another name for Mount Sinai. It was not with your ancestors that God made this covenant, no, but with us, those of us who are still alive here today. Right? I mean, we read the Torah today, and obviously we're generations of Masorah, of tradition, with this received wisdom and tradition. But the original audience that Moshe Rabbeinu was speaking to were the people who in flesh and blood, in their actual flesh and blood temporal lives, experienced the historical event of the revelation at Sinai. That's who he's speaking to. On the mountain, God spoke to you face to face out of the fire. I stood between you and God at that time to tell you God's words, since you were afraid of the fire and did not go up on the mountain. What is implicit in that last verse? You were afraid and you needed an intermediary and did not go up on the mountain.
He wasn't.
I was not. I needed no intermediary. I was up on the mountain, and I was not afraid. The same man who was afraid to look at the burning bush, into this much larger fire, he was not afraid to look. Okay. Finally, there may be more, but I think this pretty much covers most of the bases. Chapter 26 in Deuteronomy, verse 27. That's to be found Oh boy. Don't tell me there is no 26, 27. Uh-oh.
Page 989.
Yeah, you sure about that?
Kibabo.
Yeah,
Verse
that's 26, but I don't see 27. That's chapter 26. I think it runs out before we get to
27 is
27.
on page 993.
Hold on. Hold on half a second. Okay, I'm stuck. I don't think I can find our last verse. Did I do 5-4? Hold on a second. This is embarrassing. Yeah, we did 5-4. Chaf Vav, Chaf Zayin. Okay, I'm sorry. I misplaced the last verse. I can't find it. But basically what it says, I'll tell you outside what it says, that after the revelation at Sinai, okay, I got it. I know what I did wrong. We're still in chapter 5. We've got to look in chapter 5 at verses 26, 27. That's what I did wrong. Okay, I apologize. Take a look on page 687. No, 687 is the wrong Chumash again.
895.
Oh my gosh.
You want 895?
Yeah? Are you sure?
Has it too. I hope. Because that was where we were in verse 5 before. 895?
Yeah, 899. 899 verses 26 and 27. Okay, there's the aftermath. This is after the revelation at Sinai. If only their hearts would always remain this way, where they are in such awe of me, they would then keep all my commandments for all time, so that it would go well with them and their children forever. Go tell them to return to their tents. You, however, must remain here with me. Okay? That is fraught with meaning. The idea of telling the balance of the people, the rest of the nation, including his siblings, Aaron and Miriam, go back to your tents, but you stay here with me. Okay, we've done a lot of verses. Now let's see how Maimonides explains these verses. So I'm going to be giving you a running translation of Maimonides from the laws of the fundamentals. You'll forgive me, it's a dirty word, right? If I tell you fundamentals, it makes me a fundamentalist, right? But
Right.
I don't have a Judeo-fascist, right? I don't have a better word to call it. The laws of the fundamentals, the foundations of the Torah. We're going to be doing the end of the 7th chapter and the beginning of the 8th chapter. Okay? So, humble me is going, there's no Rabbi Kaplan here for this. I'm going to try to give you a running translation. One of the fundamentals of our faith is that God gives prophecy to human beings. He communicates with human beings. Now, prophecy cannot come except to a tremendously wise person, a tremendously strong person, a person who is in firm control of their inclination to evil, always overpowering it, and a person with very broad horizons and very straight thinking, very good critical faculties. A person who's got all of these superlatives and also has a physical plant that's healthy. When this person enters the Pardes, is a Talmudic euphemism for delving into the mysterious secrets of the Torah. That's what it means to enter the Pardes. A Pardes literally means an orchard, but the way it's used by the Talmud and by Maimonides, it means somebody who doesn't just appreciate the Torah on the most revealed, simplest level, but who tries to delve into the mysteries. Okay? So, as this person grows holier, and as this person separates him or herself from the madding crowd, from what most people do, who are more interested in temporal and transitory things, and does not follow things that are vanity and folly, but rather who directs and in a certain sense empties his mind, makes his mind void for things that are on high, bound to God's throne of glory to understand such things, to understand the holy and abstract forms, purified forms, and he uses his wisdom to look towards God. Immediately, Ruach HaKodesh, the divine spirit, rests upon such a person. Immediately, there are no shortcuts. I mean, think about all the preparations, all the qualifications that Maimonides enumerates before the divine spirit will rest on a person. When the divine spirit rests on this person, so this person's level, even though he's a flesh and blood human being, will be close to that of the angels, and he'll be transformed into something angelic. As it says by King Saul, when King Saul prophesied, "Vayehafach li'ish acher," he became a different person. And he will understand with a consciousness, with a wisdom, that's not as it was, it's not the normal human consciousness, but something that qualitatively is higher than that of the rest of the sons of man. As it says by King Saul, "V'hisna beisa imam v'nepachta li'ish acher." You will prophesy together with them, with other prophets, and you'll become a different kind of human being. Number 2. Paragraph number 2. Okay, just before I translate the Ram, okay. When we want to say that something is simple and straightforward, we say this isn't rocket science, right? But most of us are in awe. I don't think there are any astrophysicists in the room, are there? Most of us are in awe of neurosurgeons and astrophysicists. Yeah? Oh, you're a rocket scientist? Must be a smart guy, right? But there's rocket scientists, and then there's Albert Einstein, right? The lawyer's lawyer, the rabbi's rabbi, the nuclear physicist, right? Not everyone is created equal. So even though this sounds like, wow, this is the ultimate a human being can be, no, not every prophet is created equal. There are different, just as there are different levels of wisdom, different levels of scholarship, there are different levels of prophecy as well. He says the average, not an average, all the prophets, this is talking about standard prophecy, non-Moshe prophecy. So all the prophets can only see their prophetic visions in a dream or in a nighttime vision. Even if it happens during the day, they have to fall into a deep sleep. As we read, right, when we read the verses, when God was trying to explain to Moshe, Aaron and Miriam, the difference between themselves and their brother Moshe, right? So he said, "B'chalom adaber bo." I speak to the other prophets through a dream. All other prophets, when they have a prophecy, their limbs tremble, and their bodies grow weak, and their usual stratagems and thoughts become agitated. Why does all this happen? So that their minds are open and free to understand what they're being shown. In other words, you've got to lose your mind to gain a new mind. Okay, which is probably why it's not a total coincidence that modern man perceives people who claim prophecy to be lunatics, to be out of their minds. Because there was a certain level in true prophecy, in a certain sense, of losing the normal, temporal, transitory kind of a mind in order to achieve this heightened consciousness of prophecy.
Except those lunatics are not holy and righteous and, wise and all of the...
You never know. They claim to be. A lot of them claim to be. Okay. There is a passage in the Talmud that says that from the day that official prophecy ended, it was given to children and lunatics. There is such a passage in the Talmud. Okay, but again, that's not tonight's topic. Okay. As it says by Abraham was a great prophet, right? Founder of the Jewish religion. He better have been a true prophet. He better have been on the right track, right? But it says that by the covenant between the parts, a great terror and a deep darkness fell upon him. And that's when he had his prophecy. He couldn't grasp it awake. He had to put his body and his mind to sleep, as it were, before he could get that new mind. And as it says by the prophet Daniel, my splendor turned upon me into something destructive. In other words, my splendor was destroyed. The splendor, I guess, of his fine, keen mind was temporarily destroyed, was laid waste. Right? And I wasn't able to withhold any strength. I had no strength left when I was experiencing prophecy. Things that are made known to a prophet. This is paragraph 3. Things that are made known to a prophet are done so metaphorically, with a mashal, with an allegory. The thing is, a true prophet is able to decipher the allegory immediately. Right? Now, as far as the prophet communicating his or her vision to others, right, there are some prophets who will say both the allegory and its interpretation. There's some that will say only the interpretation, skip the allegorical part. And there are others who will only say the allegory and not say any interpretation at all, leaving it up to the biblical commentaries or for history to unfold, to understand exactly the symbolism of the prophecy. All prophets, other than Moshe Rabbeinu, it's not prophecy on demand. It's not that you can place a call. God, I need to hear from you. Please call back. Text God. Right? Call me back in the next 30 minutes. Doesn't work like that by other prophets. Right? They can get ready. They can get themselves to the level that we said before of Ruach HaKodesh, of divine inspiration laying upon them. But that doesn't necessarily mean if God isn't ready or doesn't need, if you'll forgive the word need for a moment, to speak to them, nothing's going to happen. All right? However, they could sit, and they do sit, and they do await, as it were, in a pre-prophetic readiness. They've got to be enraptured with joy, they've got to be of good heart, and they've got to be mitmoded, will isolate themselves, except it doesn't mean isolate themselves that there's no one else in the room. It means, again, to get away from the madding crowd, to get away from the normal, hubbub of everyday life. Because prophecy does not come when people are depressed or when people are lazy. It only comes through joy. And that's why the prophetic novices would play music before the prophets, to keep their spirits up, to make sure that they're in a good mood, so to speak. All right? Okay, I'm going to skip paragraph 5. And then in paragraph 6, he begins to segue into Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, everything that I've said up until this point, that's talking about the other prophets. But when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a whole qualitatively a different thing. What are some of the differences between Moshe Rabbeinu and the other prophets? The other prophets were only able to prophesy when they were asleep, when they were in a trance-like, a semi-conscious or an unconscious state. Moshe Rabbeinu prophesizes while he's awake and while he's standing up. All the other prophets, they received their prophecy through an intermediary, through an angel. That's why, that's directly connected to the fact that they're seeing things allegorically. Okay, I'm not sure what Maimonides means. I don't know why those two things are dependent upon one another, but that's what he says. If you're not getting it directly from God, if there's an intermediary delivering the message, then it's got to be allegorical. It has to be symbolic. Moshe Rabbeinu did not see things through a malach, like we read Pel Pal. I spoke to him mouth to mouth. All right? My mouth to his mouth. I would have thought my mouth to his ears. But part of it also was it was an ongoing dialogue. That Moshe Rabbeinu could demand prophecy, could say to God, not that we pray and we hope God's listening, we hope our prayers are accepted. Moshe Rabbeinu could turn to God and say, God, I'm stumped. I don't know how to adjudicate the case of the Makoshe Sheitzim, of the gatherer of wood on Shabbos, or the Benos Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad, had an issue about their inheritance in the land of Israel. Tell me what the law is. Right? I'm pretty sure that's what Pal Pal means. Not mouth to ear, but mouth to mouth. Also, another verse that we read was that God speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu face to face. Okay? These two things, mouth to mouth, face to face, means there's no intermediary. It's direct. God to Moshe, Moshe to God, like one friend to another. Right? Two friends don't need an interpreter, they don't need an agent, they don't need a lawyer. If we're friends, we speak to one another. All right? Okay. We also read that he observed the tmuna, the vision of God. There's no mashal, even for God, there's no allegory or symbolism. He sees the thing exactly, precisely the way it is. And that's what the Torah says about him. He sees me b'mara, with a vision, v'lo b'chidos, and not with riddles, not with enigmas, not with symbolism. All other prophets grew frightened and astounded through their prophecy. But Moshe Rabbeinu isn't. He's kind of relaxed, if you will. Right? I'm sure Moshe Rabbeinu had tremendous awe of heaven. Nevertheless, Moshe Rabbeinu is kasha yidaber ish al re'ahu, like one person speaks to their friend. When I'm speaking to my friend, I'm not trembling like a leaf. They're friendly, right? It's not have to hurt me. So if I'm speaking to my friend, I retain my composure, as it were. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. This is why Moshe Rabbeinu had in his own mind and his own intelligence, because of all these superlatives, because of the qualitative difference in his level of prophecy, that's why Moshe Rabbeinu was able to understand prophecy and stay at his post, as it were. Not have to leave either his consciousness, not have to lie down, not have to go to sleep, not have to tremble like a leaf. He's able to stay Moshe Rabbeinu and receive a clear, distinct prophecy. Also, other prophets were not on call 24/7. And that's the meaning of this last verse that I read for you. Let's face it, it's not just the famous prophets, Yeshaya, Yecheskel, Daniel. Right? All of the Jewish people were prophets at the revelation of Sinai. But what happens when the prophecy is done? Go back to your tents. Go back to your, so to speak, workaday, temporal, transitory lives. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, no, v'ata po amodi modi. You stay here with me. What you stay here with me really means is, you're on call 24/7. And in order to be on call 24/7, you have to be celibate. You have to be finished with family life. That's a prerequisite to being at the ready at all times. This is also why, because he was at the ready, more than at the ready, in a certain sense, he never stopped prophesizing. He was always with God. Really, the state of prophecy is a state of closeness and intimacy with God. Right? When you stop, when the state of prophecy stops, so that stops. But if you're constantly with God, he says this also explains why his mind was always bound to that of the Rock of the Ages, And that's why the Hod, the glory, was upon him forever. And this is why his countenance shined. We all know one of the great mistranslations of the Bible, Kikaran Arpanav, because the skin of his face, of his countenance, shined, and some medieval churchmen said, no, he grew horns. That's where the anti-Semitic canard, the Jews have horns, comes from. Michelangelo's Moshe, the marble statue, the two little horns going out of Moshe Rabbeinu's forehead. He wasn't working off of the living Torah. He was working at it with whatever, King James Bible, or whatever, extant translation of the Bible there was at the time. But really what it means is that his countenance shined. He had this divine, this spiritual glory that just came out of his face again, because he was in a constant state of prophecy in a certain sense. And, says Maimonides, he became sanctified as the angels. Okay, then he says a generic thing about prophecy. Some prophecy is just to raise the spiritual level of the prophet. Some is to enable the prophet to understand certain mysteries of the Torah. Some is to relate to his or her coevals, to people living in their time and place. And some is to relate for all the ages. And basically that's the prophets, the books of prophets that we have written down. There's a famous teaching of the Talmud that the Jewish people during the age of prophecy, the Jewish people had prophets twice as many as the amount of people who came out of Egypt. 1.2 million prophets, that means. How many books do we have of prophets? 24. What happened to the other 1.2 million, minus the 24? Only prophecy that was required for all generations, for all time, actually got written down and got into what we call the biblical canon. But there were many, many prophets. Okay. Now, how do you establish your bona fides as a prophet? We know there are prophets. We know there's Moshe Rabbeinu. We also know there are false prophets. How does somebody establish themselves as a prophet? So, here's what Maimonides says. When a prophet is not just a private prophet, so to speak, he or she is not a prophet who prophesizes to ennoble their souls, to understand deeper the mysteries of the Torah. They're a prophet who has a message to communicate. Okay, so if it's something that's outside the parameters of your own being, so as President Harry Truman used to say, I'm from Missouri, show me. I'm not a prophet. You say you are? Show me. Prove it to me. How do I know you're a prophet? Maybe you're a lunatic. Maybe you're a charlatan. Maybe you're just a bold-faced liar. Or you're an egomaniac who wants all the attention. You're an insecure person starved for attention. Oh, I'm a prophet. Now everybody's looking at me. How does a person establish themselves as a prophet? Says the Rambam, by working a miracle. You prove that you're a messenger from God by working a miracle. That proves that God sent you. However, not everyone who does a miracle should be accepted by the people as a prophet. It's got to be a person who basically has all the superlatives I started off saying. A very wise person, a person who's always conquering their inclination to evil, right? A person with a breadth of understanding, a person whose physical plant is in order, a person who's not depressive, all the other things, the character traits I described about a prophet. If you've got that, plus you're able to perform a miracle, okay, then we have to presume that you were a true prophet. Yeah, in other words, you have to be a pretty superlative person before you ever do your first miracle.
It's a miracle just to be a superlative person.
That's right. That's the biggest miracle. The Kotzker Rebbe once heard a chassid of another Rebbe conversing with one of his chassidim. And this guy was bragging about all the miracles that his Rebbe could do. Right? He made the cow that couldn't give milk, and he got the poor man a dowry to marry off his daughter, and the barren woman had children. And he crossed a lake without a boat. All kinds of miracles. So finally the Kotzker can't take it anymore. And not because, he had anything against that tzaddik or that rebbe, but the shallowness and the silliness and the gullibility of this chassid. He said, let me see him perform the miracle of making one true chassid. And what he meant by that was, he didn't mean a follower. He meant a superlative human being. He's a teacher, he's a rabbi, he's a rabbi. He's supposed to be teaching you the way of God. Did he make one chassid yet? Well, let's see him pull off that miracle. Okay. All right. He says, now, is it possible that the guy had all kinds of superlatives and he pulled off a miraculous stunt, let's call it for a minute, and he is faking and he's a false prophet? It's possible. It's also very interesting what Maimonides looks for as a precedent. It's also possible that when two kosher witnesses come before an ecclesiastical court and they tell a story and they can withstand withering cross-examination, they could be lying, or one of them could be lying. It's possible. But the Torah commanded us, that's the way the smart money bets, so to speak. That's the way you have to conduct things. If two kosher witnesses come to a court and they withstand the cross-examination, then the court has to adjudicate based on what they said. If a person has all these superlatives that we associate with a prophet and pulls off a miracle and then they tell you to do something, or they predict the future and you're relying on that prediction in your own behaviors, you're doing what the Torah said. There's a mitzvah in the Torah, Elov Tishmon, listen to him. I'm going to send you prophets throughout the ages, not on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, but prophets like Moshe Rabbeinu, and listen to him. If the prophet tells you to do something, listen to him. So this is what Maimonides says. Now, do we know for sure, again, with the two witnesses, or with the prophet who pulled off a miracle, do we know for sure? No. But on these things, and things similar to this, the verse says, Hanistaros Lashem Elokeinu, the hidden things belong to God. V'aniglos lanu l'vanenu, the revealed things are to us. If it's revealed, okay, if the guy looks and talks and walks and behaves like a prophet, and he pulls off the miracle, if witnesses look and talk like witnesses are supposed to, and they pass cross-examination, then that's what's revealed to us, and that's where we're just flesh and blood human beings. The rest of us are not prophets. We're not mind readers. We've got to listen to these people. That's all. That's what the Torah commands us to do. Now here's the amazing thing. Okay, I say I'm going to be grabbed by the clock tonight. I should have split this into two classes. Here's the beginning of chapter 8 in Maimonides, in the laws of the foundation of the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu was not believed in by the Jewish people because of the miracles that he pulled off. You'd say, the precedent is Moshe Rabbeinu. All right? The leprous hand, the staff and the snake, the 10 plagues of Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the granddaddy of them all the miracles that were going on at Mount Sinai, besides the actual revelation and the giving of the 10 Commandments. All kinds of other things, all pyrotechnics, and smoking mountains, and thunderclaps, and words that look visual, and synesthesia, right? Unbelievable stuff. Better than a Super Bowl halftime show is going on by Mount Sinai. Right? That's not why the Jewish people believe the Moshe Rabbeinu. Why? It's not good enough. You're trying to found a religion here. Listen to unbelievable words of Maimonides. Shahamamin al pi ha'osos yesh beliba dofi. Sheshoisa belat v'kishuv. He says, anyone whose faith is predicated on the working of a miracle, there will always be skepticism. It's healthy. It's normal. An intelligent human being should be skeptical. Why? Especially because we know, and who knows more than this than modern man, who's seen, what are they called, Penn and Teller, and tremendous illusionists, and so on and so forth. We know that there are ways to trick the eye. Trump de L'Oliel, to trick the ear, to trick the eye, photoshopping, video editing, right? Different camera angles. And in the ancient world, there was something called kishuf. There was something called black magic. This may not be holy. This may not be coming from God. Who knows what this is coming from? Right? Many of the miracles that Moshe Rabbeinu, what's really the difference between the miraculous and the magical? And the dark magical, the black magical. Okay? We're a Harry Potter generation, so we know something about the dark arts. Right? It's part of the core curriculum at Hogwarts to take 3 years of dark arts. Yeah? A person who sees somebody performing a miracle can say, "You're a prophet? How do I know you're a prophet? Maybe you're a court magician from the Pharaoh's court." A lot of the early, quote-unquote, tricks that Moshe Rabbeinu did were replicated by Pharaoh's court magicians. That makes you a prophet of God? That makes you a holy man? Maybe you're in league with the devil. What do I know who you are? You want to hear an unbelievable skepticism? Before I taught at the Jewish Heritage Center, I taught for a number of years at Baragola. Baragola is yeshiva for children of immigrants from the former Soviet Union. And a very bright guy. We spoke about, rocket scientists. I bet this guy went on to be a rocket scientist. Very, very smart guy. 11th grader I was teaching. And I don't remember which of Moshe Rabbeinu's miracle I was teaching them, the staff and the serpent, or the parting of the Sea of Reeds. I don't remember anymore. Anyway, class is listening, Some people are cursing and rushing. Some people have their jaws open. They're very credulous. They believe it's very nice, beautiful. I never knew that's what Judaism taught before. One guy raises his hand and he says, "Rabbi, you know what was Moshe?" I said, "No, Sasha, what was Moshe?" "He was extraterrestrial." He said, if I go into Australian bush and show them flashlight, I show them laser pointer, I show them calculator, I can make myself God, I can make myself prophet. He came from another planet with advanced technology. He was fooling all the silly Jewish people. This is what the guy said. Okay, so that's a modern day skepticism, but it's very clever. Right? If you believe because of an os or a mofes, you believe, this is no good. Now he's calling me. I'm in a class now. Okay, now I have to start recording again. Okay. For my own voice recorder here, we're continuing Moshe, the prophet margin of the Jewish people, part 2. Okay. So that's a monon, that's an update, but that's really what my monody says. Yesh believe it. I'm sorry, I can't believe this 100%. Okay? First of all, who says this book that you're reading from me from, is if there's any historicity to it, But even if I take it as historically accurate, yeah? Maybe he came from an advanced technology. Maybe I shouldn't have said this over. Maybe all you now wonder, hey, maybe, maybe all of this is a myth. Maybe Moshe Rabbeinu was E.T. of the ancient world, right? An alien. So listen to what Maimonides says. That's not why we believe in Moshe Rabbeinu. You would think if the faith in every prophet is predicated on their miracle working, so Moshe Rabbeinu, that's how Moshe Rabbeinu becomes the superlative prophet. Yeah? He can out-miracle anyone. They're the biggest miracles, the greatest miracles. Which really, if you stop for a minute, there's really no bigger miracle in parting the Red Sea than in getting a spoon to levitate 3 inches off of a table. If it's not an illusion, if it's being done for real, abrogating the laws of nature, abrogating the laws of nature. So bigger breaking the laws, smaller breaking the laws. It can't be. It can't be, and yet you did it. Okay, that's a miracle. Okay, but at any rate, listen to what Maimonides says. The only reason Moshe Rabbeinu performed miracles was utilitarian. He needed to perform miracles. The miracle working was not so much as Moshe Rabbeinu is wearing his prophet hat as his Redeemer of Israel hat. He needed to get the Jews out of Egypt. He had to do miracles. Not to bring proof to his prophecy. He had to drown the Egyptians. He split the sea. He had to deliver food. He made the manna bread rain down. They thirsted. They needed hydration. He broke open a rock and a spring sprang forth. He had challenges to his authority with the Korach rebellion. The earth opened and swallowed up Korach. All of these things were ad hoc. Okay, I needed this to lead my people, to sustain my people, to sustain their religion, in the case of Korach. So I had to do a miracle. What made the Jewish people believe in Moshe and understand that he's not a dark magician or an extraterrestrial? The revelation at Sinai. Because our eyes saw, and no stranger. Our ears heard, and no one else other than us. The fire, and the voices, and the thunder, and the lightning, and the way he got close to the fog, to the thick fog. And the voice of God is speaking to him, and we're eavesdropping, we're hearing it. We hear as God calls Moshe and Moshe, go tell them so and so. And so it says in the Torah, God spoke to you face to face as well, not just to me. When did he speak to you face to face? At Sinai. He spoke to you face to face, hearing him speak to me face to face. How do we know that this is true? How do we know that the ultimate establishment of our faith, not just in God, but our faith in Moshe Rabbeinu, that it's not dependent on miracles? How do we know this? The verse that I read with you. Behold, I come to you in the thickness of the cloud, so that the nations should hear as I speak to you, v'gam b'cha yaminu l'olam, and also in you will they believe forever. So we see from that verse that before that they did not believe an eternal kind of belief, not a belief that's going to withstand the test of time, that they'll believe in him forever. Because our forefathers, the generation that actually experienced the revelation at Sinai, were prophets themselves and heard God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu the way that he did, that's how a Jew in the year Tafshin Ayin Gimel, or as we call it 2013, can still declare Moshe Emes v'Torah Emes. Moshe is true and his prophecy is true. Okay. So that's everything that the Rambam says. There's a lot to speak about Moshe Rabbeinu. Many superlatives, many ways I can say the prophet margin, but at least we got the fundamental in tonight. The classic exposition of Maimonides about prophecy in general, and the supremacy of the prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu in particular. And again, this is very fundamental to the Jewish religion, because this belies any claim of any later developing religions that their prophets superseded. Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu was right for a time in human history, but now there's a new covenant, now there's a Quran, now we have to listen to the new prophet. For Jews, the prophet with the definite article, forget about it, it's not Muhammad, it's not Jesus, that's nothing to talk about. But it's not Yechezkel, it's not Yeshaya, it's not Daniel, it's not Yirmiyah, it's none of those. The ultimate prophet is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the only prophet in our history who we eavesdropped, as it were, on his prophecy. We heard his prophecy. We were made temporary prophets to see his prophecy and to hear his prophecy. Okay. Now, I can't resist. I can't hold myself back. I have to share with you a little bit. I was hoping to say over a Maral and a Rav Hutner. I have no time. You have no time. I started late. I was long-winded. Maybe I took too much time looking up the verses. I feel bad. But I feel the class would be incomplete if I didn't at least give you a brief synopsis about what Reb Chaim Volozhiner wrote, a commentary on Mishnayos Pirkei Avos. And everyone knows Pirkei Avos starts, Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. So he goes into a long exposition over there about Moshe Kibel Torah Misinai. Remember I told you before that there's a big mistake in the Living Torah by putting a comma over there? Right? He quotes a Chazal that says that early in the Torah, when it says Avraham, Avraham, it repeats Avram Avinu's name 2 times. Psik Tameh. There's a vertical line, and that's an instruction to the Baal Korah. There's supposed to be a pause. But by Moshe Rabbeinu, there's no such pause. Okay? He connects this with 2 other things. Maimonides flushed it out for us, and Maimonides codified it into 2 separate articles of faith. But the way the sages of the Talmud say it very succinctly is, all the other prophets prophesied ba'aspaklaria she'ena me'ira, with a scope that was not totally enlightened. Moshe Rabbeinu prophesied ba'aspaklaria hami. Aspaklaria is some kind of a Greek word, but it means a scope, a microscope, a telescope, something made out of glass. Hami'ira, it was totally enlightened. And then we read the biblical verse that I was wondering why in this sing-song it's left out. Why isn't there a verse that says, Ein anav keben amram? There's no humble man like the son of Amram. I don't know why it doesn't say it, but it doesn't say it. But the Torah does say it. No humble man. Now, how do the sages distinguish the humility, forget the prophecy, the humility of Moshe Rabbeinu from other great humble people in Jewish history? So in comparing and contrasting Abraham and Moshe, the Talmud says, by Abraham it says, Anochi offer ve'efer, I'm dust and ashes. By Moshe it says, V'nachnu ma, what are we? A rhetorical question. Parenthetically, King David is also in the top three, and King David says, I'm a worm, I'm not a man. So these are very lowly things, dust and ashes, worms, but they're things. They are something. They may be very low, but they're something. Moshe Rabbeinu can't even conceive of himself, and not because of a lack of a poetic turn of mind. Let me figure this out. What low thing can I think of? I'm a microbe. I'm not a multiple-celled creature. I'm regular trash. I'm not recyclables. What? Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't clever enough to come up with such a simile? It wasn't a question of cleverness. It was a question of a sense of self, or more to the point, a sense of total self-abnegation. Abraham was greatly humble. David was greatly humble. But they still had a sense of yeshus. They still felt like they were there, like they were something. Their ego may have been this tiny, but it was an ego. Moshe Rabbeinu achieved utter self-annihilation. This is what Reb Chaim Volozhiner uses to explain everything about Moshe Rabbeinu. Everything that Maimonides said about the superlatives of Moshe Rabbeinu. What do the sages mean when they say all the other prophets, including Abraham? We're talking about true prophets over here. I'm not talking about the false charlatans of the other monotheistic creeds. Every other prophet, before Moshe Rabbeinu, after Moshe Rabbeinu, they see in an unclear scope. Now, it could be other commentaries have a different approach. This is what Reb Chaim Volozhiner says. It's the difference between a pane of glass and a mirror. Okay? Now, our modern mirrors are pretty accurate, right? Mirrors for most of history, up to including when the sages of the Talmud were writing, and even in the 18th century, when Reb Chaim Volozhiner was writing, mirrors were cloudy. If the glass wasn't perfect, if it was slightly convex or concave, unintentionally, you get a funhouse mirror image, right? Little distortion there. But even a perfectly flat and a perfectly applied layer of silver onto the back of the mirror. Anyone know why ambulances always have the word ambulance on their front hood written backwards?
So they could read it in the rearview mirror.
No, because a mirror inverts everything. Mirror gets everything 180 degrees backwards. Right? Clear glass doesn't. If I can look through the glass, I can't touch the thing. There is a barrier between me and what I'm perceiving. But that clear glass doesn't mess up my perception at all. I'm seeing the thing accurately as it is. I'm not seeing it with any distortion. Now, depending on the level of ego, of sense of self, of the particular prophet, remember the prophets are human beings, and human beings have egos. They have a sense of self. Depending on the level of the sense of self, okay, this has to be bypassed in order for the message to be delivered. Otherwise, you're going to get a funhouse mirror distortion. It'll end up, God forbid, a false prophecy. Right? Things will be inverted, things will be compressed, things will be elongated. So part of the bypass mechanisms, you've got an ego, you've got a sense of self, I have to put you to sleep. You can't be awake. You have an ego, I'm going to set you a tremble. What does that mean, trembling? Trembling is a sense of withdrawal of, no, the only true existence, the only thing that really exists is you, God, not me. That's why I have to tremble. So it's a withdrawing, it's a contraction into oneself. Right? You have a sense of self. You can't have prophecy on demand. You have a sense of, part of your sense of self is your attachment to other people here on earth. Okay? Moshe Rabbeinu the prophet is detached from everyone else on earth, even from his significant other. He has no wife. Right? Everything that he writes about Moshe Rabbeinu, he connects to this idea of the ultimate in humility allows him to have the ultimate clarity in prophecy. I don't need to speak in a metaphor. Part of the metaphor, again, is to overcome the static and the interference and the room for misinterpretation that your sense of self, that your sense of ego could distort. The metaphor helps you bypass that and go, now, I have no self-interest in not chopping the symbol. Oh, you tell me what a symbol, you tell me what an allegory? Now I can understand. Okay? The greatest example of this is not God talking to a human being, but a prophet speaking to another human being. Okay? If you remember, when Nathan the prophet came to King David, and he gave him the allegory about the rich man who's got a tremendous flock of sheep, and his neighbor, the poor man, who has one sheep, and the rich man steals the sheep from the other man, he says, how do we judge such a person? And King David was furious. He said, that's an outrage. What a chazer the guy is. He has a whole flock of sheep himself, and he takes... And then the prophet turns to him and says, King, you're the rich man. You're the man with the big flock. And you're the man who took the one sheep. But he bypassed it with an allegory. He got the defense mechanisms down. That's how prophecy works too. Anything that could interfere, anything that this ego, I'm insulted, I'm sensitive, there's self-interest, maybe this is me, maybe, with an allegory, it's a way of bypassing.
So how does being in a deep sleep, like in a dream, help that?
Because your conscious mind is down. Your conscious mind is down, you're out of your conscious mind, so all of your self-flattery, all of your egos are put to sleep too, so to speak.
Okay, so he sees it in a dream and he remembers the dream.
You know what? I'm going to the most succinct answer to your question. Napoleon, legend has it. I don't know if this is true or again, I'm not vouching for the historicity of it. We all know anyway Napoleon was an extraterrestrial, right? We all know that. But at any rate, supposedly they once asked Napoleon got
a small one, a short one.
A short guy, a short extraterrestrial, right? Yeah. When he would peel off his skin at night, it was green underneath. At any rate, supposedly, Napoleon slept 3 to 4 hours in a 24-hour day on a regular basis, with no apparent adverse effects on his health. And they once asked him, it must be exhausting conquering the civilized world, pillaging and looting and whatever else he was doing, whatever, brilliant military tactician. Why didn't you sleep more? And legend has it that he answered, he says, because when I slumber, I am not Napoleon. You're only Napoleon. You're only you when you're awake. When you're asleep, you're not you. I think it's very simple. When you're asleep, you cease to be you. Anyway, Reb Chaim Volozhin says, names are the thing itself. Okay, famous medrash of the first man of Adam Arishan giving names to all the different animals, and that was supposed to show tremendous wisdom that exceeded that of the angels. Says Reb Chaim Volozhin, everything has its spiritual being on high, and that emanates and gets more and more and more material as it kind of descends onto earth, and then it has its manifestation here in this lowest of worlds. Okay? He says ego, even the slightest ego, even the slightest sense of self, can create a dissonance, a stutter step, some kind of interruption between your being on high and your being here below. Avraham, pause, Avraham. Avraham Avinu was holy. He discovered God. He was a trailblazing pioneer in prophecy. It's all true. He was a tremendously humble person. I'm ashes and dust, but as low as you can get. Right? There's still something. There's still something there. Some tiny interruption between the Avram on high and the Avram here below. Moshe Rabbeinu loy psik taimei. Moshe Rabbeinu, there's absolutely no interference, there's no interruption, there's no ego, there's no sense of self to create any kind of a dissonance, even the slightest lack of paralleling between the Moshe on high and the Moshe below. Says Reb Chaim Volozhin, when he was a rookie prophet, this was really his mandate from God. God said, take your shoes off. You know what take your shoes off mean? Divest yourself of self. The shoe is the lowest, houses the lowest part of the human body. The human body houses the lowest part of the human soul. Our whole body, our whole ego is a shoe. Most of ourselves is rooted on high, is rooted in Shemayim. Right? The Zohar, the Book of Jewish Mysticism, has a beautiful metaphor of human beings as an inverted tree, a tree that grows out of the heaven instead of growing out of the earth. The roots are up there and the branches are down here. It's an inverted tree. Man is a tree of the field. Humans are a tree of the field. We're rooted in heaven. Okay? The slowest part of our soul interfaces, comes into our bodies. So our body is a shoe. Our whole body is a shoe. When God told Moshe Rabbeinu, take your shoes off, what he meant was lose it. Divest yourself. Divest yourself of any sense of independent self. Divest yourself of any sense of that this thing that I look back at myself from in the mirror is actually me. Lose all of that. You lose all of that, there will stop to be an interruption between the Moshe on high, the Moshe below. You'll attain this once in a human history level of humility. V'nochnu ma, what are we? I have no man. I have no simile. I have nothing to compare myself with. Such a sense of self-abnegation, of self-annihilation. I have no idea what I am. That's the prophet who can receive the Torah. That's the prophet who can transmit the Word of God with high definition and high fidelity, with no distortion whatsoever. The ultimate truth, the unchangeable truth. That's Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy. And that's his prophet margin above and beyond all the other true prophets in Jewish and in human history. Okay, I felt that this was a topic, not just for the weekly parsha, but we're starting a new book. We're starting the book of Shmos. The patriarchs and the matriarchs were the stars of the show, so to speak, of the book of Genesis. Moshe Rabbeinu is the star of the balance of the Torah. I felt that this was a good topic to talk about as we start reading in our Shul Sefer Shmos this week. And all I can say is, I hope I did Reb Chaim Volozhin some justice over here. It's a lot more, it's a lot deeper, but we're being grabbed by the clock.